right, Mr. Rivera, thank you so much for allowing me to meet with you today and visit your classroom and then use a little bit of your time to discuss the post-observation. So we'll go ahead and start. So the coaching indicator we're leaning into is routines and procedures. Why would you say you selected this indicator to focus on during coaching?
Because I think it's my weakest spot as a teacher.
Okay.
It's like I have some classroom management, but the procedures part, I can lose a lot of time within the class period.
Okay. So you're saying it's your weakest part. You're good with classroom management, and I would agree with that. But just kind of honing in on some of those just steady routines and procedures, you think that would kind of help support your practice?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so we're going to frame our focus around classroom routines and procedures, but we're going to align it to the use of the lesson structure. So when I say lesson structure, do you know what I mean?
The pacing and flow of the structure of the lesson itself?
Yes, and also those segmented aspects like your activation of learning, your warm-up, your I do, or your model. We're going to align it with that, okay? So let's go segment by segment. We're going to start with the warm-up. Now, I know you say you have a plethora of students that arrive late to your class, and that's beyond your control. You can't do anything about that, of course. But what could you do so that the learning isn't stifled for the students who arrived on time and maybe to support the ones who arrived late? I want you to think about that for a bit. How long do you typically dedicate to the warm-up?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. So in that 5 minutes, are you maybe taking attendance or?
So I'll walk around the class and
Okay.
just making sure that the students are on task and doing what they need to do, having their computers ready and set, and fixing anyone that isn't on their assignment.
Okay. So I'm gonna go back to that question that I asked. What could you do so that the learning isn't stifled for students who are here? And then how can you support the ones who arrive late?
I don't really know.
Don't really
That's
know.
hard because like today I only had 5 kids at the beginning. So how do I start a lesson with only 5 students and I have to wait on the others? And I don't know.
So what I will say is that to start for the ones who are here, and then let's think of what we could do so that the class is kind of automated. So when those students that inevitably arrive late because they're consistently late, it's not just a one-off, maybe they come in and there's something put on a half sheet or something that they have to still be accountable for, whether they're, late or not. And then that way you can keep the classroom going. How about that?
Yeah.
So like if you have your warm-up, I know today was it a Nearpod?
It was a Nearpod.
And so the warm-up was like built into the Nearpod. So maybe making it that self-paced so that students can just log in. Maybe you just give them the code and say log into Nearpod and get this completed. How about that?
Okay.
So then that way you can just continue and you don't have to stop with what you're doing, and then you don't have to have that mad dash like, okay, I got 10 minutes for this, 15 minutes for this. What are your thoughts about that?
No, that makes sense, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about learning objectives.
Mr. Rivera, can you do your 5th period attendance, please?
Yes.
It's still going. Ready?
Mm.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about learning objectives. So first, are there clear TEKS objectives and demonstration of learning? Are those posted in your room?
Just on their assignments.
Okay, so it's on student assignments.
Yes.
Okay. How do you think that part would help support effective routines and procedures? Posting them in the room. Not just for you, but for students.
Okay. For students wise, I put them on their assignment so we can go back to it whenever we need to.
Okay.
So like every day I put it in their slides. And so like we'll go through it and we'll say, all right, this is what we're doing for today. Students will analyze the Federalist papers, so anti-Federalist statements and Federalist statements.
Okay.
And so they at least get an idea of what we're doing for today.
Okay. So is there an intentional part about this is our daily objective, this is what you should know by the time you in class? How do you go about that?
No, I don't do that.
Okay. So how do you think that would help support effective routines and procedures?
Like they know what they're doing.
And it's helping us with that, making sure that students are beginning with the end in mind. They know what they're accountable to learn, but then they also know how they've learned it. So tell me what you think about that.
It makes sense.
It does. Okay. All right. So let's look at the objective for today's lesson. I'm going to read it. You know what it is. Students will analyze arguments of Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So with that, that's what I saw put in the lesson plan. How can we complete that? Because it seems incomplete to me. We know that they're analyzing the arguments, but what's the ultimate goal?
Okay.
So how can we complete it? What do you want students to know and be able to do with their analysis of those arguments?
Understand the difference between a Federalist and a anti-Federalist.
So understanding the differences. Okay. All right. So that makes sense. So students will analyze the arguments of the Federalists and Anti-Federalists to understand the differences between the two groups. Does that pretty much capture it? Okay. All right. So I would say maybe look at that and kind of refine that when you're working on your lesson plans. I had something for you that I wanted to give to you because I know this is a new approach. I know you're new, and I know you taught 6th grade last year, so we're just kind of trying to refine our practices. So this is going to be your folder. I just put note paper in there so you can take notes anytime, like PLCs or anytime we meet. This is also the lesson structure. That's just your takeaway. And then we'll talk about the other parts, but this is just for you.
Okay.
You may need a pen because we have action steps with this. So maybe just to kind of take some notes. So I would maybe say lesson structure, let's go through that because the action steps are going to line up with that. So the first thing we talked about was the warm-up, having something that you can quickly give students who are late. That was one takeaway. And then completing the learning objective in the lesson plan. And so the key takeaway with the learning objective is what you want students to know and be able to do. You need me to repeat anything?
No, you're good.
Okay. All right, so we're going to transition. We've covered the warm-up aspect. We've covered the daily learning objective, the TEKS, and the demonstration of learning. Let's transition to the activation of learning. Okay, so how might you transition students from, I know you have the warm-up in Nearpod, to the activation of learning part of the lesson structure? So let me define activation of learning.
Okay.
So the activation of learning is the part of the lesson where you help students understand what it is they're getting ready to learn or what you're getting ready to teach. So how might you transition students from the warm-up to getting their attention on what they're about to learn?
I tried doing it with the objective.
Okay, tell me about it.
So I tried using the objective to tell them like, oh, like we're going to be continuing on our lesson from yesterday.
Okay.
And we're going to be analyzing the Federalist and Anti-Federalist
Okay.
papers.
All right.
And for me, like you said, like now they should be able to, I think that would help them understand what they should be able to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried using that as the flow from the do now to the actual learning assignment.
I think that's good. I think that's good practice. You can also use an open-ended question. So let's say, I think what you said is really good. If they've learned about it previously, then you might pose a question and then say, okay, talk to the person next to you about this. Maybe give them a sentence stem or a starter so that way when you're walking around, you're hearing some intentional responses. Maybe even a short video to kind of capture what they're getting ready to work on. That might be another example of activation of learning. All right, so with the routines and procedures, that's our big picture umbrella. That's what we're focusing on. So all of these are a part of the lesson structure, and that's going to kind of help you just wean in all the structures. I think you're doing an incredible job. I want to stamp that. The fact that you use Nearpod, and so it's a different mode or medium. It's not just paper and pencil or worksheet. So I definitely want to stamp that. That was great to see this morning. I know I came in a few minutes late, but that was good to see because they were just going. It's built in. They like it. You don't necessarily have to get up there and do like a direct teach. You can just facilitate and just let them have at it. So that was awesome. All right, so next we're going to transition to the I do or the model piece of the lesson. How do you normally prepare and internalize a lesson?
So, like I use a curriculum.
Okay.
So anything that is on here is from the curriculum. So the objective is pulled directly from the curriculum.
So tell me about that.
So anything that I was supposed to use the curriculum, so I use the curriculum to the T. So anything that's on here is from the curriculum itself. Nothing is from me. All I do is just change the structure, like how it's presented. And so what I do is when I look over it, I'll look at it and say, all right, what would kids find complicated? What would kids not understand? And what are some questions kids might have? And so starting from the warm-up, I wanted a way for the kids to remember from yesterday. So for me, the warm-up is the activation of learning. All right, let's look back at what we talked about yesterday. I know we don't remember. So the question was presented, based on what your memory of yesterday's assignment, what do you remember about the Federalists? What do you remember about the Anti-Federalists? Include people and belief of the Constitution.
Okay.
So then they're thinking about, all right, obviously we're going to be talking about this again. So then they start thinking about that. And then I go to the objective. And so then I pull that directly from the curriculum as well. And from there, I use the word analyze. It was in there, so I use analyze throughout the whole lesson. So analyze, analyze, analyze. Each part of the assignment was analyze, 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 analyze. It was analyzed all throughout the lesson, since that's what the objective was about, analyzing.
Okay, so you're using that verb to make sure students are doing that skill.
Yes.
Throughout the entire lesson.
Yes. And so that's what I internalized myself is what's the skill? Analyzing. How can kids read and then read to understand? From there, I plan out what are the I do. So what do I need to show them so they can know what to do? So then for today's lesson was a hard one. So we started with a very hard one, the Patrick Henry quote. And for like kids, like if they don't know what everything's saying, then they don't understand it. So vocab words that I looked at. I'm like, okay, kids won't understand what this means. Unlimited, kids should know what this means. And so basically I try to do a trade-off. I do, they answer, I question them, then they help me answer, and so forth and so forth, from like that. And then the questions themselves are also pretty difficult too. So what do you think Patrick Kinney means by the taxation? Or like, what does he mean by the U.S. taxing us? And so from there, it's just like having them decipher the text, and then be able to understand it. So the first part was about taxes. Second one was about the power of the king. They understood more of the power of the king than the taxation.
Okay.
But they understood the idea that he does not trust the government.
Okay.
And from there, I would tell them, like, all right, this is what you guys are doing for today. So you guys will be reading, analyzing these documents, answering questions, and then figuring out if they're a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist. And then we go into the part where they...
Oh, sorry.
You're
That's
good.
okay.
I'm gonna just drop this off with you. If
You're
that's
good.
all right. I think I'm good for today.
Thank you. You're good. Yeah, of course.
So you explain, you were saying you explain what's expected.
And then we did the little poll. And so then they would decide based on that poll what they thought. And that way it wasn't really a question for them. It was more of like what they thought, which I think got more responses from them than what I expected. So 75% of the students answered it correctly. And 25 didn't.
Good.
And that it shows me that data right away too. So that was great.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
then going on to the next part that you do, where I had them the directions, person A, person B. They played rock, paper, scissors for a little brain break, got into the assignment, and then kept going from there. So they read to a partner A, partner B listened, partner B answered the questions, partner A either agreed or disagreed with them, and then completed the assignment and then submitted.
So how would you rate your model for students today? The one
For
that you
first
did?
period, I would say a 6 out of 10. It got better in fourth period because it got fourth period. I started a lot earlier too, so timing wise it was great. Like we got through all of it. They could draw, like I had told you earlier, is that they were able to draw in fourth period.
Okay.
And first period, because of that time lost based on student being here, I didn't have that much time. But from first period to fourth period, first period 6 out of 10, and fourth period I would say a 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10 for the...
Because it was more flowing. Students were answering more questions or more awake. And so I think that was the huge difference for that one.
What about the part where you were talking about what you wanted them to do with partner A and partner B? How could you upgrade that, focusing only on the key understandings? So think about the objective that you had in mind, and then think about what you wanted students to do with the partner. Because I noticed they kind of struggle with that. They're like, Mr. What? Okay, what am I supposed to do? You know, that kind of thing. So how do you think you could have refined that part?
Acted it out with them. I
Yep.
think that would have helped him too. Instead of just the verbal
Yes,
saying, the visualization saying too.
exactly. Love that. Okay, what about maybe having two students explain, you know, okay, so what is partner A expected to do? All right, Joan, tell me what partner B is supposed to do.
Okay.
Something like that. So
Yeah.
it's the same, just having some other voices say it, and then that way you stamp the understanding before you give them that release.
Okay.
When you think about that. All right. So what do you think is essential for maximizing student understanding while you're delivering the I do? So I watched as you delivered what you wanted students to do. You had it projected on the board using Nearpod, and you brought out your dry erase. You were annotating and all of that. What would you say is key during that part of the lesson structure
Um,
from both students and you?
what would be like what I'm looking for, like what I really want them to understand from the text?
Well, what would you say would maximize their understanding if they were doing certain behaviors, and then if you were doing certain behaviors?
I don't know if I understand.
So, during your I do, during your model, what do you think is essential for students to do?
Read? Like, are you asking like the skills or? Okay.
What should their body language look like?
Like studious?
Well, so like if I'm giving you some information,
Uh-huh.
how do I know that you're open to receiving it?
Oh, okay. Then just like looking at them and
Yes,
communicating instead of like looking
yes.
at each other.
Because many of them, I mean, I would say 75% of the students were paying attention,
Mhm.
but then others of them, how did you get their attention? How did you know that you had all of their attention?
Mhm.
You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
yeah.
So, what do you expect them to do while you're delivering the I do?
Listening.
Mhm.
Okay.
Should they be on their computers or should they just look at the screen? Do you have a preference that you think would maximize their understanding? That kind of thing. That's the routine and procedure part.
Okay.
So what, those kind of things. I want all computers closed or hands in computers. I've heard teachers say that. What attention getter are you going to utilize so that you know that they're watching you give this explicit teach? You see what I'm
I
saying?
see.
That's your routine and procedure.
Okay.
Okay. So I want you to think about that part when it comes to the I do. All right. So also the I do, or it's called the model, whichever, you can use it interchangeably. The model contains the teacher exemplar. So you did, what was his name? Who were the letters? I mean, the documents that you were showing.
Oh, Patrick and
Patrick Henry. So you delivered the information to students, but what was the exact success criteria that you utilized for students to be successful on the assignment? Did you tell them explicitly what they were supposed to do or what you were looking for? Let's think about that. So that's another part, okay? So the teacher exemplar is essential when it comes to the I do. So here you're giving them best case scenario, you're giving them the roadmap of how they're going to get masters on this assignment, okay? So I want you to be more strategic with that, okay? So that might mean you're sharing a rubric. We talked about that with a short constructed response, or developing some kind of anchor chart so that they have a point of reference, or that can mean like a clear example of what mastery looks like. I'm going to be looking for your annotations. I'm going to be looking for your circle, your box, or your underlined words that you may not know, and I need to see that you've defined that word. So it's you telling them explicitly, this is what masters looks like, okay? So let's talk about that. You retell to me what the I do or the model piece of the lesson structure should look like.
For me, what I did was I had them talk it out and think it out. I think for me, I didn't write anything down because what I noticed is that a lot of kids will just copy what I write and not actively do the actual assignment. So like Edwin, he just waited the whole time until I wrote something down.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, like I got so tired of that I stopped doing the exemplar because all they do is just wait for me to write it down. So I don't know. I get what I understand what you're saying. They need the exemplar so they can see how it's supposed to be mastered, how it looks like.
Mm-hmm. But
I don't know how to do it in a
So-
way where they don't just copy it based on what I'm saying.
okay, so that they're doing their own original work.
Because the questions were more, they're high level thinking questions. So they have the why, the how, the not like what is. It's more like why do they think this? And for me, like if I tell them like, oh, I would have said this, and they're looking for my response, like how would Mr. Rivera say this, or how would Mr. Rivera respond to this? So how do I do it where they don't just wait for me to give them the answer?
And just copy yours?
Yes.
So do you give them a sentence stem or sentence starter?
I did not do it for this one.
providing a sentence starter so that everybody has equal opportunity, and then they have to go, so, you know, with their own thoughts. So the sentence starter they can use, but they still have to use evidence from the text. They still have to express their own complete thoughts. So saying that, maybe you write your own and then you give them the disclaimer. I'm not going to be able to give you guys the full credit if you're writing exactly what I'm writing. So I'm looking for you to reference the text like I did in sentence 2. I'm looking for you to explain using your own thoughts. And then you can kind of cycle around the room to see if they're doing that. But you just tell them, this is my expectation. Not that you're using what I wrote, but I want to see your original thoughts.
Yeah.
And so maybe if you see that happening, then you're working, like you cycled around the room, you're pushing in with that student and saying, well, this is what I wrote. So come on, let's think about what you know, what's in your head. So maybe it's just about empowering their confidence to do their own and just kind of see what that does.
Okay.
That's what I'm thinking. What do you think about that?
Systems, yeah.
Okay.
Systems.
So I'm going to stop here because I want us to kind of summarize the action steps. So a week from today, I'm going to come back and I'm going to see, look for these things. These are going to be my look fors, the lesson structure. Now, we haven't gone through every aspect, but I wanted it to be like bite-sized chunks. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to overwhelm you. So I want to see these parts of the lesson structure whenever I come in a week from today. I can come to your first period if you'd like, or you can tell me which period, but that's going to be the action step. So I want to see, I just want to make sure I said it. The posted teats and objectives in DOL. I know that you said that you have it on the student assignment and you have it in your slides, but my thinking is anybody that walks in this room, I don't want them to question what you're doing. I want them to know, okay, he's focusing on Federalists and Anti-Federalists or the Constitution or Declaration of Independence, and this is how he's going about it. So that intentional part about doing that.
So,
So-
Mr. Rivera,